welcome everybody to this episode of EIPA in Conversation with. My name is Karen. I'm going to be your host and moderator for today. I'll start off with a little bit of housekeeping and by explaining why this session has been organized and who are our guest speakers today. In terms of housekeeping, the session is supposed to be engaging and interactive, so we really welcome your questions and comments, and you can include them in the chat box. And then as soon as possible, I will just pose the questions to our speakers. The way the session is organized, I'm going to give a brief introduction of today's EIPA in Conversation, just informally by describing or by running you through how the idea for this specific webinar came about. And then I'm going to introduce the two speakers and start asking them questions myself before giving you the floor through the chat box for asking questions. So we're going to record the session, meaning that this will be available to you in the next months or so, in case you want to rewatch it. We also invite you, of course, to stay tuned for the next episodes and to register to the newsletter in case you like this session and would like to participate to others as well. So the way the idea for this session came about is very simple. A few months ago, we have been commissioned by the European Parliament for the drafting of one study, which will look at how the gender gap, what was the situation of the gender gap in EU member states. We focus specifically on the public sector and the public administration and try to identify best practices of policies which would help reducing gender inequality and enhancing gender equality and equal opportunities for women. And after having published the study, we thought it would be a great idea to keep the conversation going and just to focus on some specific aspects that, of course, for limits of time and page number, we couldn't expand on. Now, before we start with the general introductions, I'd like to thank all the other authors who have contributed to the study, the rest of the research team. To you, there will be, of course, just a string of names, but behind those names, there's people whose intellectual efforts has ultimately resulted in this session, in the study, in promoting conversations. And I'm referring to Olivia Brown, Ivona Carvut, Lucas Adobavicius, Elena Velasco, Petra Yene, Isami Aparicio, and Gracia Vara Arribas. So thank you to all. As you saw, most are women, but not all of them. Now, before we move to our questions, I would like to introduce the two speakers and thank them again for taking their time in what I understand to be a very busy period for all of us. I'm here today with Radoslav Nedvadkov, and he's a chief auditor at the Bulgarian Audit Authority. He's got more than 17 years experience in the field of audit. So we're going today to try and understand together how gender equality policies are embedded or can be embedded in the implementation of EU funds and projects. And then I have today, so welcome Radoslav. And then I have also with us today, we have Annette Madinator. She's the Vice President of Strategic Business Development at Cybersecurity PLC. And also she's the President of the Women for Cyber Initiative. It's an initiative that was launched by the European Cybersecurity Organizations and by the Commission. So welcome Annette today as well. I think, Annette, I will start from some questions to you specifically, and I'll give a little bit of background. Of course, when we talk about gender equality and equal opportunities, several fields which are challenging come up. And one of the challenges relates, for example, to the occupational segregation or educational segregation as well, meaning, for example, the concentration of women only in certain fields of knowledge or in certain occupations, but not of others. And so my first question is whether cybersecurity is one of those fields where we have occupational segregation, as in not many women represented, and how could we overcome it? What is causing it, or what are we losing on? So it's a broad question. If you could give us a little bit your point of your experience, it would be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Clara. Thank you for the opportunity. This is actually my first time to collaborate with the EIPA, but it's a great pleasure for me because public administration is large in Europe, I believe. And so it's very important that public administration understands the cybersecurity gender gap issue. The question is quite important, what you are posing. In cybersecurity, how we start defining this issue or how we start elaborating this issue, first of all, is to understand that cybersecurity experts either have a STEM background or they don't have it. It's like yes or no. And so it's somehow related, it is somehow related to the age of cybersecurity experts as well. Because when I started my career in cybersecurity, there were hardly any university courses available specific in cybersecurity. Or I could even go further, there were no available courses in some sub-areas of cybersecurity at all. So what was available was engineering, IT engineering, and programming or software development related courses, and that's all. But that is not cybersecurity. So that's one issue, that there is a certain age-related approach that we need to take into consideration, that above a certain age, simply gaining a degree in cybersecurity was a kind of non-existent question. Because if you take cybersecurity in general, the evolution of cybersecurity, let's say, you can easily understand that it's a kind of area or let's say scientific or business area, much rather, apologies, which is really, really young. So even just think about since when we had the internet, okay? So it's a really, really young branch of industry. On the other hand, for the younger generation, what is definitive, let's say, is whether they have a STEM background and they somehow turn to the technical side of cybersecurity, or if they don't have a STEM background, but they have background in human studies, policy studies, or anything else, basically, they may turn to the operational layer or above, or go towards or move towards, divert towards the management layer, let's say. And so what needs to be understood that the third angle, on top of these two, the third angle is the gender question. I wouldn't even say gender gap to start with, but it's much rather a question first, or an issue to tackle. Because that is true in general for STEM education, that the majority of young taking STEM education in general, or aiming to get STEM education, are men, young men, let's say, and usually it's not more than 20%. Of course, it depends on the member states and depends on local university programs as well, but it's usually not more than 10%. It's between 10 and 20%. The ratio of young ladies taking STEM education. And this is actually a long-term trend that we are observing. So if we start to grab this issue anyhow, I believe the ideal point if we think in long term, is to grab it somehow around the age when the young are actually entering university education. Everything else that comes after this point is in time a kind of closer handling of the issue or closer dealing with the issue to our time. If we invest in the entry point and then we are sort of directing the young to take the STEM approach, then we are investing in the future. If we are dealing with this situation, targeting those who are at their later ages, let's say, we are dealing with the issue that we are facing now. So this problem has many angles. And I'm finishing now for a while because I let you posing questions if you have any, because I can talk about it actually. Sorry.
Yeah, we are not in a rush, but no, thank you for the point of view. I'll try to summarize it for myself as well. Do I understand correctly that then there's two parallel issues here? There's the issue of all those, let's say, who graduated or undertook their education before cybersecurity became a very much developed field, come from STEM, and STEM has been notoriously for years and years a male, when I say male, it's a terrible expression, but I say a field of knowledge where men have been more participating, let's put it this way. And so your eyes or your recommendations for the future, that we take a step back and we look at how we can form a cybersecurity field of knowledge and expertise, which includes women, by already having in place policies which promote women's undertaking high-level education in this field in a more specialized way. Am I correct? This would be a recommendation.
Absolutely, yes. And you kindly mentioned Women for Cyber Foundation and the initiative in your introductory thought. Thank you for that. I also take the opportunity to promote this initiative.
I was about to ask. Yep, no worries.
Yes, because this is actually the European Community Building Initiative supported by the European Commission to somehow improve this situation. And we have a roadmap to tackle this issue or to deal with this issue with the support of the Commission and with the support of the European community. And that's a kind of working document, let's say. We are revising and improving it on a regular basis on European level. It also has a section to match local goals and local needs. Because by now we already work with the national chapters of Women for Cyber Foundation and the initiative. And so actually yesterday we had a half-day event with the council supporting the initiative. And that was a very long discussion and a significant discussion on how to start dealing with this issue or how to get on dealing with this issue on a long term. And it just came out that there are so many different societies, so many different university setups in Europe within the member states that we simply cannot have one unified approach to tackle this problem. It needs to be customized so that it is able to assist and boost local developments, let's say. Because there is one certain situation in, let's say, Germany, where university education has a certain structure, and what the German colleagues identify is that the orientation of young ladies towards cybersecurity actually is defined or somehow becomes fixed, let's say, before they enter university education. So it somehow gets decided before the age of 18. So for example, we need to grab the attention of the young in let's say, secondary education age period. And then we can sort of boost their turning towards cybersecurity on a long term, on a larger scale, okay? In Spain, or in France or in smaller member states, the situation may be completely different. Because there, the job market structure is slightly different, the education structure is much different, let's say, or the programs available are much different. And so they are quite keen to run programs that are able to divert the young who are already out in the job market, but somehow are interested in joining cybersecurity, even if they do not have a STEM background or an engineering background. So there is no one unified solution available, and it's not even recommended to somehow try to find or set up. What fits the goal much more is to adapt our program, let's say, to local needs. So this is basically one of the greatest, let's say, understandings of the foundation of this very year, let's say. And so we are trying to boost local programs, and we are trying to set up as many national chapters as possible to help or assist the local processes.
Thank you. I was, in fact, I'm happy you said it, because I was about to ask how the work of your foundation counts into the bigger context. And it's great that you also gave us the chance to reflect on the dialogue you have, for example, with the Council, EU institutions, and with member states to, and you're correct that this challenge of more broadly of gender inequality, but also sectorial, needs tailored approaches. And then we go back to also the discussion of how we can make sure that women in some contexts even get to education at all after their secondary education. And then specifically, how do we make sure that we can support their inclusion in the cyber sector? I have, following on that, another question on you, and then I'll post also the link to the foundation so they see the different chapters and everybody can see what's happening in their individual countries. I take a look as well at mine sometimes. My question is the following one. I understand that the situation now is such that there's anyway a gap in the level of determined by many reasons, by whether the expertise is technical or policy oriented, whether the background is STEM or not, that there is a gap in the level of management in which women are in the cyber sector. From the situation, which is now, I understand, is difficult to tackle this present, but we can prevent that the situation deteriorates or continues in the future. From looking at the situation now, in your opinion, is there something we are missing out, or we would be missing out in the future by not having women included in this sector? It's a very difficult question, the what if, or the trying to establish what does a specific sector lose of not having the inclusion of women. And I understand it can be also disputable, but if you have any thoughts on that, it would be great to have your point of view.
Yes, this is a question that we usually get in the past couple of years. Apologies for the background noise. We are very close to the hospital district of Budapest, and we are still having this COVID situation. So the thing is that I personally don't believe that any of the two genders, let's say, are better than the other. So let's start from this fundamental approach. None of us worth more than the others somehow. What matters, or what should matter in an ideal situation, is basically the expertise, the skills, dedicatedness, and the effort that the unique person pulls into his or her job to promote cybersecurity or simply to deliver. Okay. On the other hand, if you take it from a sort of helicopter view, what you can identify is that men cybersecurity experts usually can concentrate on specific tasks, and they can be very much technically oriented. Some of them are very good managers as well. So the C level, as obviously, is dominated by men, cybersecurity colleagues, let's say. So we don't question their approaches, and we don't question their role in that level either, obviously, but what ladies or young women or women cybersecurity experts are exceptionally good at, let's put it like that, is coordination. And having a kind of, overarching, broader view of any specific areas. For example, and this is what I always like to communicate, that within military organizations, without naming any of them, obviously, and in multinational political and military organizations, the most successful cyber defense coordination experts are women. So I strongly believe that what we should consider and where or towards what we should orient ourselves is that provide opportunities for women in those areas where coordination skills and organizing skills, let's say, and lower level managerial skills are extremely important. High-level management positions are, I believe, also absolutely suitable for ladies, but those need a different type of dedicatedness and different type of background. It's not even absolutely necessary to be an expert in cybersecurity to be able to get a kind of high C-level position and to deliver in those positions because we've seen many ladies being successful who come, for example, from political background or policy background in those positions. So in a nutshell, it's a kind of question whether someone wants to take a one goal approach that fits men slightly better, I should say. If someone is interested in having a sort of, multiple focus approach or position or task, then a woman may be more successful in that.
Thank you. It's very interesting because, in fact, what I find extremely interesting about what you've just said is to have this more nitty-gritty approach. So let's see which competencies we need. Let's try to map where we normally find that consequence, and then we figure out who we need for the job. But taking into account, of course, as you said just at the beginning, there should be no discrimination whatsoever, not positive or negative, when one enters into a job. So thank you, was a very interesting point of view. And now, Annette, if you allow me, I will just switch to a conversation with Radoslav, and of course we keep the questions going. And we're going to look at another important chunk of initiatives that can indeed help reducing the risk of having gender inequality, which is in the area of EU policies and EU funding, where you have your best expertise as an auditor. So my first question is, again, very general, and then we follow it from there, which is whether the principles of gender equality and equal opportunities, again, equal opportunities, personally my favorite notion, and gender equalities can be very controversial, but also important. Are these, or to what extent are these embedded in new programs and in the design and implementations of policies, in your own opinion? And please feel free also to make reference to your own experience in member states.
Hello to everybody. Thank you for the interesting questions. Generally speaking, concerning the rules of these operational programs and cross-border programs financed by the European Union, in fact, there is no difference between men and women, and in every project must be some measures and descriptions how these principles of equal opportunities are observed. According to my experience, I have seen hundreds of application forms which are approved, and after that they became real projects, and most of them successfully implemented. But anyway, when I see this specific chapter where this description should be written, in fact, they have only one or two very general sentences. Sounds like a declaration. We observe the principles of equal opportunities between women and men, and so on and so on. In fact, for me as an auditor, this is not sufficient. I would like to see concrete measures which are envisaged in the relevant application form, how they will observe this principle when they select, for example, target group, when they perform some activities like trainings, like other public events, how they will ensure that at least half of the participants will be women, for example. And this is not very clearly described, and during the performance of these activities also there is not very clear how they observe this principle, how they provide equal opportunities. In fact, yes, we are checking the list of participants. We can see and identify if at least half of the participants are men or women. But anyway, there is no audit trail how they were invited for the event. And generally speaking, I think there is a lot of room for improvement in this field.
Thank you, and I find it very interesting as well. I have the feeling as well sometimes that there is some term drop in there. We talk about gender equality and equal opportunities, as in we commit to that, but from what I understand, what you see is evidence that this is happening. And so I understand you become suspicious when you say that in some applications or some project descriptions or reports, you might have reference to it, but not incredible evidence or credible evidence, sorry, for it. And I was wondering, which are the parts of the documentations relevant to your auditing that you see that are a red flag for you? I'm thinking simple example, if there is a presentation of a budget and there is differences between the pay, or if, as you say yourself, you've got a list of participants to an activity or an event, and maybe on paper there's already a discrepancy. So which are the red flags from an auditing point of view? Where do you look for your evidence as an investigator?
During our audits on operations, we have strict checklists. We are following these checklists. And concerning our methodology, the red flags are related first to the selection of the projects. If they are selected properly according to the requirements, according to the assessment grids, if the selection is objective, if the evaluators sign the declarations or lack of conflict of interest, if the scores are justified. This is one of our indicators. Also, we check if the evaluators have sufficient competence and experience, also how these evaluators were selected, if there are some indications for conflict of interest, and so on and so on. And during the checks on the field of the particular projects, we are checking mainly the public procurement procedures. There are a lot of red flags concerning public procurement procedures, like only one bid were received, or the the actual amount of the contract signed is very equal to the indicative amount of the public procurement, and or all of the bidders were rejected except only one particular candidate. So there are a lot of such indicators. And concerning these specific equal opportunities principles and their observations, we really checked very in details if the initial conditions in this application form are observed. For example, if the applicant stated that at least 50% of the participants will be men, and the other 50% will be women, we are checking this list of participants. We are checking photos from the events, from the trainings, from other public events, and all other supporting documents like presentations and other such documents.
Thank you very much also for making concrete. For example, I don't have an auditing background, so it's interesting for me to know what you would be checking things against to make sure that policies are respected or implemented, or that some principles are embedded. I have maybe one last question, but if I have time, even two. There's now, of course, going to be the rollout of the EU Recovery and Resiliency Plan, which could potentially be a good opportunity for the promotion of equal opportunities and gender equality policies. What do you think, again, from an auditing perspective, could be put in place to make sure that under this funding scheme, which is going to be one of the most important for the next years, that this becomes actually an occasion for stabilizing, I would say, the process that we have undertaken to promote gender equality and equal opportunities. So from your own perspective, how can we make the best out of the next funding scheme?
I think that the managing authorities which should issue this guidance for applicants and prepare the calls for projects, they should think very smart and to create such specific measures, and maybe in their assessment grids to have such very detailed guidance for the evaluators how to assess these application forms in this respect. And for example, if the applicant just write only one formal sentence that I will respect the principle of equal opportunity, just to receive 0 points in this field, for example, and to give more points for applications where this description are adequate and in details. So we can be sure that when the project is selected, really this principle will be observed. I think this is one of the opportunities to raise this issue and promote this issue during the next calls for project applications.
Thank you for the suggestion. I think before I leave the floor to participants, and we are great time-wise, of course, I always start from the assumption that as a speaker, I don't know everything. So my questions don't capture everything that's important to say or to talk about. So I'll first see if you would like to add anything in particular that you think is important to debate, that it's relevant to your work and that we haven't addressed. And I'll give you a couple of minutes to think about it while I invite participants to put some questions in the chat box so that I can read them aloud. So I'll give you 2 minutes of rest in case, and to come up with any point you would like to add. And in the meantime, if any of the attendees would like to pose questions to any three of us, please feel free to write them in the chat. Otherwise, yes, let's wait a minute or so for to see if there's anything, question and answer. I can see. So until now, we have made, yes, the report available. I hope that my link has reached you all, but I will resend it. And then I'll leave the words to you in the meantime, starting from Annette, so that Radoslav can also take a couple of minutes to think. Is there anything that, yes, we have a question actually. Sorry, Annette, before we go to you. There is a question for Radoslav already, which is which type of recommendations the audit authority makes when you find that the respect of gender equality principle is not sufficiently demonstrated. So in your work, what kind of suggestions you make, or the audit authority? Yes.
It depends if we found these weaknesses and gap at the level of the managing authority when they prepare the relevant call for project proposals and they do not have sufficient guidance and sufficient checks in their evaluation grids. We make a recommendation to improve the methodology, to improve these evaluation grids for the next call for project proposals. And when we are on the spot, when we are checking particular projects on the field, and if this principle is not respected, and if this is written in the application form, this is a very good reason for financial correction because the application form was approved based on specific conditions written in this application form. And in case the beneficiary do not respect these conditions, so in most of the cases, a financial correction will be imposed. And it depends on the specific essence of the infringement, and if it is significant, definitely there will be a financial impact and financial correction. If it is not very significant, yes, we can write only a finding without financial impact, for example.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. Thanks. I hope that answers the question, but I think it does. So thank you for it. Okay, so before we see if there is any other questions, I'll ask each of you separately if there is anything else you would like to add. I'll start again from. Is there anything we haven't discussed or you think we should have addressed, or anything that it's on your mind that about this specific topic should be dealt with?
Let me start. So just very briefly, one issue that is quite widely discussed in Europe is the question of, and then I will make two recommendations, or let's say updates on how the situation is in how we can practically tackle the gender gap issue in cybersecurity. Primarily, what is many times cited that there needs to be a gender equality in cybersecurity, and let me question this in quite a straightforward way, because I believe that having the approach that promotes gender neutrality is a much more useful or much more natural approach to tackle the lack of female cybersecurity experts or women cybersecurity experts in Europe. And why I'm saying that is that we should definitely concentrate or put much more attention on the personal achievements than gender. I also understand that in such a pioneering time where we are now, it's very important to help those minorities, let's say, which are not that much in favor, let's say, when choosing someone for a position or when choosing many for positions. Still, I think on a longer term, having the approach in mind that we need to somehow proceed towards gender neutrality is a much more useful approach. Because closing men out of cybersecurity positions solely because women have to, the employment of women has to reach a certain ratio may be counterproductive. And so to support that, Women for Cyber Foundation is preparing two deliverables, let's call them deliverables now, because they are still under development. One is that we will collaborate with the job portal from autumn this year, hopefully, if everything fits well. And there will be a special section of this job portal dedicated for women cybersecurity position seekers or job seekers. We will run several pilots with this job portal. And so we gave ourselves 1 year, let's say, to find out what structure fits the needs the best. But there will be one from autumn available. And we are also communicating very actively with the HR community of Europe to help them understand the real situation and to make them a little bit more aware or more skilled on how to seek for those cybersecurity experts, especially women, for certain positions who fit the needs better than how it's configured now. Additionally, the second item that I wanted to mention is that on a longer term, we are also aiming to set up special mentorship programs and a cybersecurity academy dedicated for women in Europe to somehow make solutions available in a more natural way than solely concentrating on meeting a certain number or figure that there needs to be 40% of female cybersecurity experts involved in certain areas or involved in certain projects. So on a longer term, I believe the solution needs to come in a more natural way. But to reach that status, let's say, when we can let it a bit more loosely go, we need to do a lot. And I can see some questions in the chat. So I'll give the floor to you.
Thank you. So first of all, just a small remark from my side as well, and then because you touched upon one of the issues that provoked the most beautiful discussions, to be fair, in the write-up to the study, which is how do we make sure that what we are addressing and what it's recommended, because in the end you make recommendations, does not turn out into long-term policies which then discriminate towards men or any other group. And I think, yeah, the suggestion or the hope is that in the long term, there is a gender neutral approach where you just select it without bias, which depends on your gender, on your ethnic group or religion or any other factor. But we also see this as a necessary intermediate steps before we get to the ideal state that you described. I just wanted to clarify, because our position as well is this one, that we would not want that on the long run these policies end up with a discriminatory effect, but at the moment, because of a gap that has been created by years and years of missed opportunities, these are relevant measures. But we are with you, and it's a very crucial point to make, maybe one of the most important when we talk about equal opportunities. And sorry, just this remark on behalf of, I hope the authors will agree with that as well. Radoslav, if you allow me, I'll take these two questions and then I'll get to you to see from your side if you have something to add. Would that be okay then? Yeah?
Yes, of course.
Lovely, thank you so much. And the questions are for the both of you. So whoever feels that they would like to provide an answer. So the first one is from Lucas. I'll read it aloud. How do you think the EU should direct its gender policy? Because currently its policies are merely focused on protecting existing rights, but very little is done in policy field to develop new approaches. What is your difficult question? What is your view on it? So how do we shift from simply making sure that the basic rights are protected to active promotion, if I understand correctly? Please.
Let me start very briefly, because I really think this is not really, but this is an extremely important question. And I hope that many young PA public administration experts are reading this chat and or reading the study, and are prepared to make adjustments in the EU policies and local public administration policies in this respect as well. What is missing from our perspective, from the public administration policies and gender policies in general, and then I'm answering two questions in one, is those vehicles or solutions, policy level solutions, that sort of allow a kind of natural development to include more women in certain areas. And it's not solely for cybersecurity. I think it's a general issue. So I would not pick cybersecurity as the ultimate goal to achieve, that there needs to be more women involved, but that should be a general approach. And if cybersecurity benefits from that change, then we are extremely well off in this situation. On a longer term, if you take the numbers, the statistics, like how many women are involved in university education in general, regardless whether it's STEM or non-STEM, or within STEM, whether it's cybersecurity or not, then you can easily identify that there are actually more women involved in university education than men, slightly more women involved. So my impression is that this process has already been changed somehow, but the long-term effects will be visible perhaps in the next financial period or financing period of the history of EU, not even in the current one. So public administration and policy making still has a couple of years to find out those vehicles or those measures that they can implement on a longer term into the gender and gender-related policy elements.
Thank you for addressing these important questions indeed, and two at once. Radoslav, would you have something to add to the whole conversation, or would you like to address one of the questions? I will add also the one from Olivia. I'll read it aloud in case it's convenient also for those who listen, which is what lessons can be learned from the gender experience. But this one is not for you. What can academics and research institutes do to help close the gender gap in the PA or in general? Or the first question is, how can the EU direct or redirect its gender policy? If you have any comments or on the questions or the conversation in general.
Yes, thank you for these interesting questions. In fact, I totally agree with other speaker. And I would like just to add that I strongly hope that soon there will be a significant improvement, and for this should be awareness raising and also good motivation for the young women to focus on particular areas and fields which at the current moment are considered as just very popular only for the men. And I agree that women, they have their skill, they have their competence, and the competence and skills, they are not related to the sex, they just relate to the individual person. And concerning Bulgaria, I can tell you that a lot of improvements have already happened. For example, in the public administration, the percentage of women are much more higher than the percentage of the men. Also, in many other public bodies, this is the real situation at the moment. But anyway, in specific let's say, areas, I think good and smart political decision should be taken in order to give real equal opportunities and to motivate young women to start their career in particular areas. And also this should be supported by specific policies.
Thank you very much, Radoslav. And indeed, I think from both your interventions, it's clear we would need a full new sessions just on equal opportunity for whichever category might be struggling to be included in anything in the job market or any other domain. Is there any other question from the audience to start with? And thank you very much to Olivia and Lucas and Claudia, and before Federica as well for their questions. But then if there is no other question, I would like to thank Annette and Radoslav for having been here, for having shared your expertise, for having put yourself out there on a topic that is very controversial, exciting and important, giving also the most important thing, long-term perspectives and recommendations. This is what makes a difference. And so for everyone else, I've included in the chat box a link to the study and to our website. In case you would like to attend any other of our webinars, it would be great to see you. Annette, good luck with your work. Radoslav, good luck with your work. I think we're all in good hands in your respective fields. And on behalf of EIPA, all attendees, I would like to thank you for being here today. And to everyone else, I wish you good luck, a good rest of the year, and I hope I'll see you one of the next EIPA in conversation.
Have a very nice day to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity, and I wish you the best for your work. It's very important.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.